husband's ex showed up at our wedding, claiming she was still engaged to him. I was standing there in my wedding gown, fingers trembling against the delicate lace, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the music. My best friend Nora clutched my bouquet, and for one miraculous instant, I thought everything was perfect. The aisle was lined with white orchids, guests in their finest attire sat on either side, and the soft strains of a violin wrapped the moment in a gentle hush. Then, I heard a sharp, insistent voice cut through the calm. "Stop! This wedding can't go on," it shouted, startling everyone into dead silence. At first, I thought it must be a misunderstanding, some confused guest who had wandered in uninvited. But the woman by the door looked furious, her face twisted with something that went beyond anger, as though she believed the world owed her an explanation. She held up her hand and declared, "He's still engaged to me. This is my fiancé. You can't marry him." My vision blurred as I tried to process her words. Martin, my Martin, who stood beside me moments ago with all the promise of a happy future in his eyes, had turned white as a sheet. He opened his mouth, but not a sound emerged. I saw him glance down at his shoes, then at me and back at the intruder. The hush around us felt charged, like a lightning storm was about to strike. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My father, sitting on the first row, half rose from his chair, as if he might stride forward and toss this woman out. But he too froze when Martin finally managed to speak. "Natalie," he said very quietly, as though the name alone weighed 1,000 pounds. "Why are you here?" The woman, Natalie, lifted her chin and shot me a look that spelled trouble. "Don't act like you don't know," she hissed. "I have the messages. I have every promise you ever made. You never ended it. Not properly. You think you can just run off and marry someone else? I don't think so." Everyone was shifting in their seats now, confused and unsettled. Nora squeezed my shoulder in support, but my mind was spinning. Who was this woman? Why did she speak with such conviction? And why did Martin, my sweet, adoring fiancé, not vehemently deny her claims? A day earlier, I would have laughed at any suggestion that someone might sabotage my wedding. But here she was, and I had no idea how to handle it. My mother hurried up the aisle, her face drawn with concern, while my maid of honor hurried after her, trying to calm me with quiet words. All the while, Martin looked like a prisoner awaiting his sentence. He took a step toward Natalie, quietly gesturing for her to step aside. The officiant cleared his throat, uncertain whether to continue. Whispering broke out among the guests. Some were already reaching for their phones, presumably to capture this awful moment or text their friends about the drama unfolding before them. I found myself rooted in place, gripping the edge of my veil. Could this be real? As Martin and Natalie stepped into a corner to speak, I felt something inside my chest tear. The day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life had turned into an implosion of confusion and disbelief. My father approached me gently, placing a hand on my elbow. "I'm here," he said softly. "Whatever is going on, we'll figure it out." But I was shaking too much to answer. I recalled all the times over these past months that Martin had stiffened if his phone buzzed unexpectedly. Sometimes a shadow would cross his face when I asked about his past relationships, and he would give me a vague, reluctant half-smile, never detailing much. I'd suspected he might have had a harsh breakup that still stung, but I had never pushed. I trusted him. Until this moment, I had no reason not to. That morning, I'd awoken with fluttering excitement. It was my wedding day, the day I would walk down the aisle to meet the man I loved. I remembered the sunlight streaming into my bedroom as Nora tiptoed in, holding a cup of chamomile tea to calm my nerves. She was humming a cheerful tune, telling me how everything was set. The flowers had arrived. The cake was perfect. The string quartet had done a final rehearsal. I smiled, reassured. I didn't question Martin's devotion for a second. Sure, I'd noticed some tension whenever his exes were mentioned, but I chalked it up to normal discomfort about old relationships. If I had known anything like this could happen, I might have asked more questions, demanded more clarity. Maybe then I wouldn't be here, watching my own wedding turn into a spectacle. When Martin came over in the morning to see me before the ceremony, he insisted on a modern twist, ignoring the old notion that seeing the bride was bad luck. He'd looked nervous but excited. He kissed my forehead, told me how beautiful I was, made me laugh at his attempts to fix his tie. I teased him about his shaky hands. Now, only a couple of hours later, I stared at him across the room, and he looked like a different person. Guilt? Fear? Regret? I couldn't read his expression. Natalie, on the other hand, looked enraged and triumphant. It took another long moment before Martin turned around and approached me, taking my hand gently. His grip was cold and sweaty. The woman behind him folded her arms, glaring at us both. He spoke in a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I need to explain." I could barely look him in the eyes. My cheeks burned. Part of me wanted to run, to hide from the stares of our guests. Another part wanted to confront him in front of everyone. to demand the answers I deserved. But I couldn't bring myself to make a scene. Instead, my mother and father quietly guided us into a small side room off the main hall, telling the guests to remain seated, telling the officiant that we just needed a moment. The door closed behind us, muting the buzz of speculation. My wedding dress rustled against the polished floor as I turned to face him. Natalie followed, pushing past my mother, determined to be part of the conversation. Nora tried to block her path, but it was no use. Natalie was unstoppable. She glared at me, her eyes shining with tears of rage. "This is my fiancé," she repeated, voice trembling now. "He promised me a future. He never officially ended things. He just ran away." Martin stepped between us, hands raised. "Stop," he said, calmer than I expected. "Enough, Natalie. We ended it over a year ago," she scoffed. "Don't pretend that you were clear. You promised me after our fight that we'd talk again. We never got that talk, Martin. You left me with no closure." She pulled out her phone, scrolling with frantic energy. "I have your texts. You told me you just needed some space and time. Not that it was over." I searched his face. "Is that true?" I asked, my voice cracking. He hung his head. "I told her I needed space, yes, but I swear I never meant to keep her hanging. I didn't handle it right." My mind reeled as I considered the possibility that Martin, the man I thought I knew, might have left an old promise lingering, never fully severed. I could hear the murmur of the wedding guests on the other side of the door. My heart pounded with every second that ticked by. He placed a hand on my arm. "Please, you have to trust me," he whispered. "I love you." It was all a huge misunderstanding. I tried to end things, but she refused to accept it. Natalie barked a laugh. "Misunderstanding? I moved out of my life for him. My parents helped us book a venue for our wedding, and he just vanished." She turned to me, eyes brimming with fury and heartbreak. "Did he tell you that we paid a deposit for a hall 3 months before he even met you?" I inhaled sharply. That explained her sense of ownership. She believed she already had a claim on Martin. But that deposit could have been canceled. Something was off here. I tried to remain calm, to keep my voice steady. "Martin," I said, "why didn't you tell me all of this? Why didn't you explain that you were engaged before?" He sighed heavily, glancing at Natalie. I was ashamed of how it all ended. We rushed into an engagement. Her parents pushed us, my parents pushed us, but we fought constantly. I didn't want that life. I wanted out, and I thought telling her I needed space would be gentler. Then I moved to the city for work, and I thought that was it. I thought she'd move on. Natalie winced as though he'd physically struck her. "So you just left me there," she said quietly. While I waited, Martin covered his face with his hands, and my stomach twisted in knots. The conflict between them was real. I could see the swirl of confusion and pain in Natalie's eyes. Part of me pitied her. But what about my wedding? What about us? Outside, I heard someone knock on the door. Nora's voice sounded, hushed yet urgent. "We need to figure out what's going on. People are getting antsy. Photographers are still rolling." My father opened the door just a crack, peering in. He looked at me, then at Martin, and this unknown woman. And I saw the helplessness in his expression. "Darling," he said softly, "whatever you decide to do, we'll stand by you. But you need to make a call soon." I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "I just need to talk to her. Alone," I told Martin and my father, ignoring the confusion that flickered in their eyes. I wanted to speak to Natalie one-on-one, away from his defenses. So Martin and my parents left the room, leaving me alone with the woman who had stormed in and turned my world on its head. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Natalie looked down at my gown, at the veil twisted in my hands. Her bottom lip trembled, and I wasn't sure whether she was about to scream or cry. She took a step closer. "I'm sorry," she began softly, though her voice was still shaking, "that this had to happen on your big day, but you have to understand my side. I thought Martin was mine. I was certain we'd marry. He never told me it was truly over. And then I heard he was engaged to someone else. My friends saw it online, rumors about this lavish wedding. I lost it. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to see for myself." Something in her tone was almost pleading. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "I get that you might have been confused, but did you really think this was the way to solve it? To burst in and humiliate everyone? If you truly loved him once, why ruin his life?" She let out a strangled laugh. "Ruin his life? He ruined mine. And I guess I wanted to ruin his in return. That was my first thought. But I also believed if I confronted him face to face, he might realize he still cared about me. We had so many plans, and then he threw them away." I pressed my lips together. "It sounds like you two had a toxic relationship," I said quietly. "People break up. It hurts, but they move on." She shook her head vigorously. "I couldn't move on," she admitted, tears welling up. "I was so sure we just needed to talk, that with time, we'd reconcile. I waited, and he never called. Then out of nowhere, I see that he's replaced me with someone new." Her words stung, and for a strange moment I felt sorry for her. She was clearly heartbroken, clinging to the memory of a life she wanted. But what about my life? My dreams? Outside, the music had stopped. The hush felt suffocating. I steadied myself and asked, "What do you want now? Do you think Martin will just take your hand and walk away from me? We're about to get married." She bit her lip. A part of me hopes he'll see how he's hurt me and, I don't know, maybe he'll at least apologize. Maybe he'll realize he never gave us a proper chance. My heart squeezed. Was there a shred of truth in her accusation that he never formally ended it? He admitted he used vague language. But that was a far cry from him still wanting to marry her. I thought of all the late-night talks Martin and I had, planning our honeymoon, picking out paint colors for the new apartment. Had he done the same with her once? Probably. That made me nauseous. "Look," I said gently, "I don't know you, but I don't want to hate you. I do want to marry Martin. I love him. He has told me repeatedly that he wants a future with me. If he made mistakes with you, if he left you dangling, that's on him to fix. But what you did today, you blindsided us. I'm not sure how we recover from this." She wiped her eyes, her anger diminishing into exhaustion. "I thought I'd come here and he'd see me, and something would snap back in place. It doesn't look like that's happening." She sank down on a nearby chair, letting out a shaky breath. I thought if he saw me in person, he would realize he made a mistake." A wave of sorrow washed over me, strangely mixing with my frustration. We were two women caught in the crossfire of Martin's poor communication. Yes, he left her in the dark. But yes, she also crossed a line by showing up here and humiliating me in front of everyone. I inhaled, trying to collect myself. "I'm going to talk to him now," I said, gently but firmly. "I need to figure out what to do with this ceremony. And I don't know if you should stay, or if it's better for you to go." She looked at me, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'll leave," she whispered. "Just tell him, please, that I deserved better than a silent goodbye." I nodded, feeling a strange heaviness in my chest. I found Martin in the hallway, pacing while my father hovered protectively nearby. The hush among the guests was palpable. Many of them were standing now, some craning their necks to see down the corridor. My mother was offering hurried reassurances that everything would be fine, that we just needed a private discussion. Martin looked at me with desperation in his eyes. "How did it go?" he asked. I could only shake my head. "She's hurting, Martin. She thinks you never broke it off properly. She's leaving, but I'm still in shock." His eyes brimmed with anxiety. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just a coward," he admitted. I hated confrontation. I left her a message saying I was done, that I was moving to the city. I told her we were incompatible and that I didn't want to keep trying. But I guess maybe I told her it was for now, because she was so upset. I was trying to let her down gently. I never thought she'd interpret it as me leaving the door open. I folded my arms, feeling the bones of my shoulders press against the bodice of my wedding dress. The adrenaline from the confrontation was ebbing, leaving me numb. "So what do we do now?" I asked quietly. "What do you want me to do, Martin? Pretend this never happened? Because everyone out there knows now." He gently took my hand, eyes pleading. "I want to marry you," he said, voice trembling. "That's all I've ever wanted since I proposed. I'm sorry I never told you in detail about Natalie. I truly believed that part of my life was over." Tears gathered in my own eyes as I glanced around, noticing that some guests had ventured to the edge of the hallway to see if we were returning. My father murmured, "We can ask the guests for a recess. Postpone the ceremony for an hour while you two talk. Or you can continue right now if you feel ready. It's your call." I closed my eyes, trying to summon some clarity. My groom had technically been engaged before, but had never formally severed the bond in a clean way. Natalie had harbored illusions and heartbreak. She came to ruin my day, or maybe reclaim him, or maybe just to find closure. It was a mess. Yet my feelings for Martin ran deep. When I thought of him, I saw the man who brought me my favorite flowers when I felt down, who taught me how to ski last winter, who played silly games with my little cousins at family get-togethers. Was all that overshadowed by the fact that he'd made a mistake, a big one, in handling a past relationship? Could I trust him after this? His voice trembled with raw emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you, or her, or anyone. I couldn't face her meltdown. I thought ignoring it was the kinder way. I realized that we were all victims of a misunderstanding, but also victims of his inability to face an uncomfortable truth." My mother approached, looking worried. "People are gossiping, dear. They want to know if there's still going to be a wedding." My pulse pounded. I imagined walking back in, the music starting up again, all eyes locked on me, but this time in a swirl of morbid fascination. "Yes, let's see if they'll finish their vows," they'd whisper. "I can't believe a second fiancé showed up." I felt Martin's grip tighten. "Please," he whispered, "give me the chance to prove I'm worth marrying. We can get past this. I know we can." My father stepped aside. letting us have some space. Nora hovered behind him, looking at me anxiously. I love you, she mouthed silently, reminding me I had support. For a long moment, I stared into Martin's eyes, searching for any hint that he might still have feelings for Natalie or that he was lying. But all I saw was regret and fear that I'd walk away. I reached up and touched his cheek. You did mess up, I said bluntly. You should have told me about her. You should have given her a real final goodbye. But if you swear that this is truly over, if you swear you're not hiding anything else from me, my voice wavered and I took a breath, then I can try to forgive you. A flash of relief lit his face, followed quickly by an almost pleading look, as if he needed more than that. I promise, he said. No more secrets. I should have dealt with her properly from the start. I'll do whatever it takes for you to trust me again. In that moment, I knew the relationship we had before could never be the same. This was a wound that would take time to heal, but I also knew that I didn't want to call off the wedding because of his past mistakes, not if he was willing to admit them and work to fix them. After all, love is messy. People have baggage. I just hadn't expected the baggage to knock on the door of our ceremony screaming for him to come back. I pressed my lips together. Then let's go, I said, and explain something to our guests. Martin nodded, and together, we walked back toward the main hall. I saw Natalie in the lobby, standing uncertainly, her eyes flicking up when she noticed us. She bit her lip, looking defeated. I gave her a small nod. Not a happy one, but a courteous acknowledgement that maybe someday we'd both find peace. She lowered her gaze, then quietly slipped out the door. Inside, someone had dimmed the lights. The officiant stood near the arch of flowers, his face a mask of polite concern. The guests rustled with anticipation, a wave of hushed whispers floating from row to row. When we reached the front, we turned to face the sea of curious stares. My father took my mother's hand, and they both stepped aside, giving me room to breathe. I cleared my throat, voice shaking. Thank you all for your patience, I began. We had an unexpected situation arise. A muted laugh rippled through the crowd, part shock, part relief. I continued. Some of you might have seen or heard that a woman came forward claiming Martin had promised to marry her. We want you to know that while the interruption was unexpected, Martin and I have talked, and we still wish to proceed with our vows. A wave of quiet applause and murmured approval swept across the room, though some looked uncertain, possibly wondering if I was making the right choice. My hands trembled, but Martin enveloped them in his. As the officiant resumed his place, the music began once more, softly, though the mood was undeniably changed. My father gave me a nod of encouragement, and Martin and I stood there side by side, each of us carrying the weight of what had happened. We repeated the words we'd rehearsed, the promises to love and to cherish, in good times and bad, through heartbreak and through triumph. My voice was thick with tears but also resolution. When we exchanged rings, I saw tears sparkling in his eyes. It was not the perfect wedding we'd planned. Our first moments as husband and wife were laced with shock and sadness for the havoc caused. Still, we emerged from that ceremony knowing we had a lot to work through, but we'd try. At the reception, the tension was palpable at first. Guests approached us, some uncertain whether to congratulate us or to ask for more details about the fiasco. My mother whispered, "Don't worry. Focus on your happiness right now. We'll handle the rest." Even so, I spent the first half hour in a daze, forcing a smile, hugging well-wishers while replaying the day's events in my mind. Martin stayed close, always within reach. Every so often, he'd lean in and whisper, "I'm so sorry," and I'd give him a tiny nod. One of my aunts patted my shoulder and said in hushed tones, "Well, dear, you'll have quite a story for your grandchildren." That made me laugh a little, if only because the alternative was breaking down in tears. I found myself stepping outside onto the terrace for air. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with dusky pinks and golds. I breathed in, counting slowly to calm my nerves. The door opened behind me, and Martin joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. We stood for a while, watching the horizon. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "I know this isn't how you wanted today to be," he said, sounding broken. "I feel like I destroyed your dream of a perfect wedding." I rested my head on his shoulder. "I'm not sure a perfect wedding exists," I admitted, "but this was definitely a worst-case scenario. Still, I chose to believe in you. I just need you to prove that faith isn't misplaced." He turned, gently tilting my chin up so I could meet his eyes. "I'll do everything I can to make sure you never regret marrying me," he said softly. "I promise I'm done running from my problems." I believed him, or at least I wanted to. A while later, we rejoined our guests and cut the cake, receiving a burst of cheers and a few relieved smiles. My father tried to salvage the atmosphere by making a heartfelt toast about how love can overcome challenges, even when they appear at the worst possible time. Some of our relatives and friends looked on with tender sympathy, while others seemed unsettled. I caught fragments of their whispers. "Poor girl. He should have been more honest." That ex-fiancé had a screw loose, but in the swirl of dancing, clinking glasses, and forced laughter, I clung to Martin, shutting out the chatter. Our first dance was quiet, subdued. The band played a slow melody, and we simply swayed in each other's arms. I had pictured a moment brimming with unbridled joy, all eyes on us as we smiled in newlywed bliss. Instead, it felt like we were two people clinging to each other after a storm, uncertain if the calm would hold. When the final guests departed, we were left in the ballroom with a few family members. Nora stayed behind to help gather up leftover flowers and gifts. She embraced me, then teased Martin with a faint smile. "You better take care of her, or you'll have me to deal with." Despite everything, I felt grateful for her unwavering support. After we checked into our wedding suite, a lavish room I once dreamed of entering in a swirl of excitement, I sank onto the edge of the bed, exhausted. Martin slipped off his jacket and sat beside me, hand over mine. For a long time, we just stayed there, neither quite sure what to say. Finally, he murmured, "I love you," in that tender voice that once made my heart flutter. This time, it made my heart ache. "I love you too," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. "But I'm still raw. I need some time to process what happened." He stroked my hair, exhaling slowly. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." In the days that followed, social media erupted with photos and rumors. Bride's wedding interrupted by groom's ex-fiancé, and so on. Friends texted me, worried and curious. I told them the basics. Martin had been careless, never clarifying with her that it was truly over. She had come to crash the wedding. I tried to keep the explanations short, partly because I was emotionally drained, and partly because I wanted to protect Martin from gossip. Meanwhile, Martin sent an email to Natalie, apologizing for never giving her the closure she needed. He told me he offered to pay her back for any deposits she'd lost. She hadn't replied, but he said it felt like the right thing to do. I hoped it might give her some peace, though I suspected she would carry the scars for a long while. My parents were supportive, if visibly stressed about the entire affair. They avoided confrontation but insisted Martin and I see a counselor, if only to start our marriage with open communication. I was initially hesitant, but Martin agreed wholeheartedly. We found a counselor who specialized in couples dealing with past relationship baggage. It was surreal to be in therapy less than a week after our wedding, but we both felt it was necessary. During the sessions, Martin revealed that he'd always been conflict-averse. When things got difficult, he'd shut down or escape. Natalie had been intense. They fought often, and he dreaded telling her face-to-face that he was done. So he used ambiguous words, left the door ajar, then moved away. In therapy, I learned how his coping mechanism was to avoid, and how that left many issues unresolved, including with me. We talked for hours about how betrayal can happen in small ways, such as hiding the truth, not just in big, deliberate lies. Some nights, I woke up feeling anxious. I'd roll over in bed, watch Martin sleeping, and wonder if there were more secrets lurking in his past. But each time, I reminded myself of the vow I made to give him a chance, to let him show me he could be honest. He kept his phone unlocked, inviting me to look through it if I ever felt insecure, which I didn't do, but the gesture helped. He made a point of telling me where he was going, who he was meeting, and that transparency soothed my nerves. Slowly, we began forging a new level of trust. One evening, about a month after the wedding, we sat on the couch looking at our wedding photos. "At least the photographer didn't capture Natalie bursting through the door," Martin joked wryly. "But it's definitely not the typical wedding album," I said, noticing how forced our smiles were in some shots, especially those taken after the ceremony. Yet in others, especially the candid moments, I saw genuine warmth in our eyes. The love we had was still there, perhaps more realistic now, not cloaked in illusions of perfection. My father once told me that a strong marriage isn't about never having storms. It's about being able to endure them together. That thought comforted me more than I ever expected. Weeks turned into months. We returned to our everyday routines, me focusing on my photography business, Martin on his job and finance. We'd go on weekend hikes, plan small dinner parties with friends, and each time, it felt a little less like we were under the shadow of that disastrous wedding day. The rumor mill died down, replaced by new gossip. Occasionally, a friend who hadn't heard the news would ask us about our wedding, and we'd exchange a glance before one of us launched into a heavily edited version of the story. Over time, the shock and hurt softened. I found myself forgiving Martin more each day, though I never forgot how deeply it had cut me. He, on his side, tried to make up for his failings with kindness, patience, and total honesty. On our first anniversary, he gave me a note that said, "A year ago, I almost lost you because of my past. Thank you for staying, for believing in me. This year has taught me that love demands courage. The courage to confront mistakes, to open up about old scars, and to face the future without fear. I love you more than ever." I cried reading it, recalling how I'd once dreamed of that day but never imagined it would come with such baggage. We spent our anniversary quietly, out of town in a cozy cabin, just the two of us. We reminisced about our first dates, laughed about the silly fights we used to have, and yes, we even talked about Natalie. By then, the wound had healed enough for me to feel only a twinge of sadness rather than anger. Martin said he hoped she found peace and wished her happiness. And I found that I hoped the same. Sometimes I think about how life would have been had she never shown up at our wedding. We might have gone on, never fully confronting Martin's tendency to avoid problems, or my own tendency to trust blindly. In a twisted way, her interruption forced us to expose our vulnerabilities from day one, leaving no room for complacency or secrets. We learned to talk about uncomfortable things. We learned that a marriage can still stand even when chaos barges in, provided both partners decide to fight for it. And ironically, that knowledge gave us a stronger foundation than we might have had otherwise. Still, the memory lingers. Every so often, I recall that moment when she burst in, the collective gasp of our friends and family, the metallic taste of panic in my mouth. I remember my father's concerned face, the flash of camera phones, the hush that fell over the room. I remember how my heart pounded at the prospect of walking away from the man I loved, but I didn't walk away. And here we are, building a life that is flawed yet somehow more authentic. Because now I know that Martin and I have faced the worst together and survived. People will always talk, but we've learned to listen to each other above all else. I will never forget the lesson that no one's past is truly gone until it's laid to rest properly. And that love is an ongoing choice, one we make despite everything that might come crashing through the door. So whenever someone jokes about that crazy wedding, I just smile and say, yes, it was wild. Because it was. It was also the day I discovered that my husband had a side to him he'd never fully revealed, that I had more strength than I realized, and that sometimes the best choice is the messy, complicated one that still leads to love. We walk forward together, aware of our imperfections, but committed to facing them head on. After all, we vowed to love each other for better or for worse. And in a single afternoon, we got a taste of both. And through it all, we found a reason to stay, to fight for the life we want. That reason, plain and simple, is love.